What are the best dental startup demographics? It's a big topic, and I'm glad you're here watching because this topic is especially important if you're considering if you should open a startup practice in the city or in a suburban area. City versus suburb, which is better for startups? It's a question that almost every associate dentist asks, and I want to share with you some of the facts behind what actually works. Now, just so you know, this is going to be based on helping hundreds of startup practices all over the country. This is not theory. This is real practical information that has been tested from coast to coast. And I'll share some very specific numbers with you, very specific cities, regions, concepts, and even doctor successes that you could try to model your startup after. So city versus suburb. What are some of the trade-offs between the two? It's one of the most important topics that you're going to consider with a startup. So let's talk about this. If we're looking at a city on the left side of the page, some things like higher population counts are going to have to be factored in versus the suburbs. Do you want to serve more families with the kind of dental startup that you could be opening? You're going to be dealing with more competition in the city? Or do you think the suburbs might have faster growth? A lot of times, suburban areas are growing by concentric rings of growth, faster and faster through each year. Or what about cities? Oftentimes cities have worse congestion. Is that good or bad for a startup? Is that traffic going to be good or bad for you? What about for the team, the people you hire or attract to work in your startup practice? In the suburbs, for example, on the right-hand side, are there even enough patients? Because the population density is not as strong. Are there enough patients in every suburban area? These are the kind of questions that I want you to be thinking about, especially when it comes to real estate. In suburban and city areas, the real estate numbers are very different. In most cities, the real estate prices can be incredibly high, versus in suburban areas, you might be able to get a more open space, green area practice. For example, you might desire to have a practice that has clean, open, modern lines with bright rooms. If that's you, you might want to prioritize the suburbs. But here's the big question. One of the biggest questions in startups, for better and worse, happens to be this: the doctor to population ratio. Now, if you've started to look into startups, perhaps you've heard of this ratio. Typically, this means how many doctors are in an area as compared to the population in an area. The implication is that the better the ratio, the lower the competition. The theory goes, as many people who sell demographics reports, I'm not one of them, but for many people who sell demographics reports, they would have you believe that a higher ratio is always better. I'd like to share some of the realities about this with you, especially when it comes to people like this. So I promised to share some real numbers with you. This is Dr. David. We're going to be looking at his example and how he was in a city area. He actually had his second practice in a city area, and with a few small tweaks, he was able to use some of these city versus suburban topics to grow his startup to have over 1,000 new patients in his first year, which is very different from his first practice. I'll tell you the pros and the cons there. This is Dr. Brian. Dr. Brian had over 200 patients in his first 2 months, and this doctor, I'll tell you the details behind his situation, but he was able to collect $1 million in his first 12 months from a cold scratch startup practice having zero business experience. So I'll show you how he did that in a suburban area, even an hour plus outside the city. And this is Jerry. I put Jerry's picture here in the middle of the screen because he was actually right outside the city limits. So we're going to look at his story too. But remember I said I'm going to be showing you exact numbers, especially with this doctor to population ratio. Well, I'll give it to you right now. And then we're going to dissect it. So I'll share some of the numbers with you. And then I want to share with you how these numbers affect the plan. The plan for you, for your city versus suburban startup, is going to be very specific. So here are the numbers. For Dr. David, I would like to show you how his ratio here, this is what many would say is a fantastic ratio. 5,927 to 1. What does that mean? That means 5,927 population for every dentist in his region. Now, in this specific pocket where my team was able to find him a spot for his practice, there were actually 0 dentists. So I'm not sure how that works in maybe a mathematician's ratio when the 0 is in the numerator position, but you get the point. 5,927 to 0 is a pretty good opportunity, and we'll explain how this worked for him and why that made sense. Next, you can see Dr. Bryan. His numbers are a little hidden behind there, but you can see his doctor to population ratio is 1,451. Now, this is important because this ratio is arguably much lower, nearly 25% lower than some of the so-called experts would have you believe is good for you. And in a suburban area, that might be true. But the people who sell demographics reports, they're going to tell you to hyper-focus on this number. And the theory would show, or the theory would say, that a low doctor-to-population ratio in a suburban area is bad for the practice. Well, try telling that to Dr. Bryan, who had $1 million collections in his first year. We'll talk about his situation. And Dr. Jerry, the one who's right on the city limits, he had 958 to 1. His population to doctor ratio was 958. So we'll talk about why that was relevant for him, especially right outside the city limits in Philadelphia. But here's the deal. The demographic paradox is the real issue. So many doctors, associate doctors, are told by podcasts and so-called experts and people who sell these demographics reports that you need to hyper-focus on the ratio. I'd like to explain this paradox to you through this discussion, but where does all this information come from, and who the heck am I? Well, I'm going to show you even more demographics reports, especially when it comes to, I guess, demystifying a lot of this. And I'd like to share with you where this information comes from. What is all this based on? I mentioned hundreds of startups. Well, here's where it comes from. My name's Jamie Amos. I'm the CEO of Ideal Practices. We're the country's #1 consulting firm for startup practices. We have opened more startup practices for private practice associate dentists than anyone in dentistry. And the things I'm going to share with you here are just my way of giving back. Now, should you decide that you'd like to reach out to my team and have us guide you through the process, that would be great. If you'd like to attend one of our courses, that too would be great. But for now, I just want to share information that can help give you direction, give you some eye-opening learning experiences right here in the next 5 or 10 minutes. This information, so you know, is based on years of analyzing what's worked for startups all across the country. I'm the author of a best-selling book called Choosing the Right Practice Location. It actually sells every month on Amazon. And at the end of this mini course, I'll show you how you can get a copy without having to even pay Amazon for your copy. We have a podcast called the Ideal Practices Podcast. We take some of our clients on a missions trip. Our most recent was in the Dominican Republic, where we were able to help hundreds of people in the remote hills of the Dominican Republic with 3 of our own clients. It was an amazing experience helping hundreds of people. We've been featured in publications like the ADA and Dental Town and the Townie event and Dental Products Report. We've been on stage at events like Delivering Wow and the Dental Success Institute at the Dental Success Summit with Dr. Mark Costas. So we also have a course called the Startup Practice Blueprint. Now, we don't advertise a lot for this course, partially because we only accept 24 applicants into the course each time. The course fills out months in advance, but should you want to be considered for attendance at the course, you could always just Google Startup Practice Blueprint, and you can find out how to apply. You can see the guy with the beard right there in the middle. He's actually one of our case studies today. That's Dr. David, and he was one of our panel members. We always have clients come and speak to the attendees at the course, so you could learn right from them. We have a blog where you could learn all sorts of good tips. Now, here's my team. So you know, sometimes I wish, with all the successes we've created, sometimes selfishly, I kind of wish I could take all the credit, but I can't. And it's a good thing I can't, because on the right side of the screen, the people on the right side there, the women behind me there, those are some of the members of our startup MBA team. Those are the folks who help teach the business side of dentistry to doctors, and it's the business of startups, which is very different from the business of dentistry. Catch that. Ready? The business of startups. Very different from the business of dentistry, typically because startup hiring is different, startup marketing is different, startup policies, protocols, systems, all those things are different. So toward the middle of the screen, you can see the gentleman with the Under Armour hat. I think it's an Under Armour hat. And the blue shorts, that's Steven. He's the president of Ideal Practices. He has now helped 650 startups in dentistry. unbelievable. I don't think I know anybody else who has that much experience. You can see some of the gentlemen with the hats on the left-hand side of the screen. Some of those folks are the folks who design floor plans or run demographics or do marketing with our clients. So this is the team. These are some of the people who you now can see their faces, who are behind some of the successes that we create. The one right in the middle is Jen. She has the Ithaca soccer shirt on. Her daughter is an Olympics-bound soccer player. She'll probably play pro soccer, but that's Jen. She's our lead startup strategy advisor. If you would like to speak to Ideal Practices about helping you through this process, I would love to actually extend to you a free 1-hour strategy discussion with Jen about the startup strategy planning process. If you'd like to talk to her, we can give you some resources for how to do that later. But that's Jen. Remember her. So Ideal Practices, so you know, we're not just about startups in the country, in the United States. Every time we open a startup in the United States, we actually fund 10 startup businesses in third world countries. I'm telling you this just because I can't resist but sharing with you how passionate we are about startups in general. I love startups and I love entrepreneurialism because it affects lives and it changes communities. With what we do, every time we open a startup practice in the United States, we fund through a micro lending process. We fund the nonprofit loans that goes to some of the people on the right-hand side of the screen are literal recipients of these loans in third world countries. This is how much we love startups. So just so you know, my passion, my excitement spreads to startups all over the world, not just here in the United States. But in dentistry, this is one of the great learning experiences that you could peel away from this. If you'd like, you could look into the Startup Practice documentary at some point. That there is Dr. Brian. He's one of our case studies today. The documentary is very powerful. It's a 5-episode Netflix-style documentary. If you wanted to check it out, it's at startupdentist.com. That's startupdentist.com. Okay, let's get back into the demographics. In this demographics process, these are our 3 case studies, right? On the left-hand side of the screen, we have city. On the right-hand side of the screen, we have suburbs. So left side of the screen, Dr. David. Right side of the screen, Dr. Brian. In the middle, Dr. Jerry. Let's take a look at Dr. David first, the guy with the beard. So here's Dr. David. Interestingly, when Dr. David came to Ideal Practices and we wanted to help him open his startup practice, he was inside the city limits with a practice that his father started. So his father was right inside the city limits in a very large metropolitan area in the northern part of the United States. Interestingly, his father sold him the practice just a couple years before reaching out to Ideal Practices, and Dr. David said, my dad's practice is fine, it's good, but I'd love to try a startup because I have all my dad's protocol, all my dad's patients, all my dad's habits, all my dad's team. I'd love to have my own, maybe my own DNA, my own control, my own systems, my own creation that I can take credit for. So we actually helped him open a startup right on the other side of town. Same city. As a matter of fact, it's just 15 minutes away. Now, in Dr. David's case, here's the fascinating thing. Same city, 15 minutes away. His startup practice outproduced his father's practice in the first year. So many doctors will tell you things like, well, you can't open a startup in today's economy in cities because there's too much congestion. There's too much competition. There's too much real estate issues, too many legal problems. Well, you know, in some cases, that's true. And for some of your colleagues, maybe you've even seen that to be true. The reality is that real estate is a very complicated game. When you're trying to negotiate for real estate in a city, there are some significant complications like which landlord is really going to want all that plumbing put in their office? Or let's say you're in a high rise. What if the tenant below has top secret documents? I know that might sound funny, but we've actually had that happen where right outside of Washington, D.C., one of our clients was told by a realtor in that region to go sign a lease for a space that was right above an FBI office. Now, they had top secret documents in this FBI office, and there is no way that in this city the doctor would be allowed to drill holes in the floor above an FBI office. The FBI doesn't like their documents being looked at from the ceiling, if you know what I mean. So the issue is this. In cities, is it complicated? Sure. But with the right strategy, you could be 15 minutes away from another location and still have a booming success story. Dr. Dave had 1,000 new patients in his first year. He had a gorgeous, bright, open floor plan with a practice that he is so proud of, that is so profitable in the first year, that he would love to open another practice, perhaps even in the same city. So city startups can work well. Let's go look at Dr. Jerry. Dr. Jerry is the doctor who's right outside the city limits. Remember I said right outside of Philadelphia? Well, this is important because I'm actually from Philadelphia. I know Philly very well. So I put the star for the location for his practice right on the outer ring of that city limit, because that's essentially where Jerry is. Now, look at his ratio. 958 to 1. That's really not a great ratio according to the demographics so-called experts, right? 958 to 1 is, well, that's lower than I even write about in my own book. In my book, I actually write that the lowest ratio you should consider is 2,000 to 1. So why did my team advise Jerry to go here, where the ratio is 958 to 1? Well, here's why. Because for Jerry, it made sense. And because that strategy worked for him, you can see he already had 300 new patients just in his first 6 weeks. That's not typical for a startup. Let's be candid. You've probably heard from a lot of colleagues who've opened startups who have nowhere near 300 patients. And some of your colleagues, I know some of them email me and say, Jamie, I haven't even seen 300 patients in my first year, let alone my first 6 weeks. And here's what the point I want to make to you. Remember I mentioned the demographics paradox? Be careful. If you're looking at a city versus a suburban area, please do yourself a favor. Do not be tricked by those folks who sell demographics reports, because the ratio is not what will bring you success. Now, I know that sounds like heresy to some people. In some circles, that might be worthy of putting me up at the stake, right? Burning me at the stake, as they say. But for you, I want to help protect you from the misinformation that's out there. A great ratio from some guy who sells you a demographics report on the internet is not what will bring your startup success. Okay, remember I said this is Philadelphia? Inside the city limits, I can actually show you, I'm going to show you right now, a specific pocket in the city to make my point. Here's a pocket in Philadelphia where the demographics ratio is off the charts. I looked it up. It's in a region called West Philly. It's doctor to population ratio 1 to 8,200. Now, this is phenomenal, right? 8,200 to 1. Holy moly. That's massive. That's a lot of patients for every doctor. Look at Jerry's. Jerry's is bad. Remember, I said in my own book, 1 to 2,000 is a kind of a baseline benchmark ratio. Well, here, 8,200 to 1 is fantastic. Well, this pocket that I'm referring to is in West Philadelphia. Who else is from West Philadelphia? Have you ever heard of this guy? That's Will Smith. He's not a dentist, obviously. Will Smith is from West Philly. If you hear about Will Smith, he actually donates a lot of time, donates a lot of resources to West Philly to rebuild West Philadelphia, because West Philly is a mess. Look at these pictures. I just pulled these from Google today. 4 people found dead. Look at the left. 4 people found dead in phillyvoice.com. Look at the top one. West Philly fire leaves 1 dead on, at the ABC News affiliate there. Or look at the bottom picture. An interesting site in West Philly. That's from a real estate company, OCF Realty. If you're a realtor, why would you call that an interesting site in West Philly? Weird. Whatever. But here's the thing. This is West Philly. Now, if you were to buy this dude's demographics report and try to make a decision based on demographics ratios, the math of this, guys, hear me out, please. Do not forget this. The ratio is not what you should base the decisions on for your startup. Why? Because this is not about math. This is your life. A startup practice is about your life. Let me show you this guy's life. This is Dr. Brian. He did not make his decisions based on math, and thank God he didn't, because now he has this incredible life story. You should see how he literally tears up. He gets emotional in the documentary. You should watch the documentary at some point. Free copies, we still have them at startupdentist.com. In the documentary, you'll see how Dr. Brian talks about his family and his children and how he's able to make an impact in his community. And I'll give you a quote from him. He said, "For me, it's not even about dentistry now. In my first year, I'm going to collect $1 million. And for me, this has become much bigger than dentistry. Those are Brian's words. 200 patients in the first month. Look at the ratio. Ready? We're talking a lot about the doctor to population ratio. For Dr. Brian, he is an hour away from the city. So he's near a city in the southeast, a very rapidly growing city. And he's about an hour outside of the city, where the demographics ratio with the people 15 minutes from his desired location, the ratio is only 1,451 to 1, which is not a good doctor to population ratio. It's just not. But right now, Dr. Brian, in his first year, he has more reviews than anybody else in his town. He's now, as a matter of fact, he has become the largest donor to a nonprofit that plays an important part in his life for his family. He actually has a program where he tells his community that with every new patient who comes to his practice, he is able to help sponsor a family of a child with special needs, which is really powerful and meaningful for him, because when he and I first talked, he actually told me about how when he was a child, he had a young sibling who lost their life to a special needs condition. So he was a young child and they lost a sibling near birth to a special needs condition. Well, in Brian's case, he actually wants now to help cure this and serve families who are in need, who have special needs, children with special needs conditions. So he's able to do that. And he's now the largest donor in his community to this nonprofit. Why? Because his practice was successful. How? Because he followed a proven plan, not a math equation. But hear me out. If Brian had followed a simple math equation, he would have missed out. You'll see in the documentary, your mind will be blown at what he did and how he's now affecting his community. It's so powerful. That ratio is not what this is about. So remember, if you're thinking about a city versus suburban topic and you're looking at demographics, remember this demographics paradox. It's not about the ratio. So here's this. Let me show you something that will help frame the entire startup practice discussion. Look at this screen. These are the 13 stages to grand opening. Now, there's a lot to take in here. I'll try not to belabor this too long. I'll try to give you a quick overview. Look from top to bottom. You can see where it says stage 1. Do you see that on the top? It says stage 1. Stage 1 says vision. Well, stage 1 goes all the way down to stage 13. Look at stage 13 right there at the bottom near the orange thing. It says completion, stage 13. So 13 stages from top to bottom. Now look at the bottom where it says month 1. You see month 1? Month 1 through month 12. This is a 1-year timeline. Now, full disclosure, not all startups open in a year. Sometimes it takes longer. And you can see from this graph how that may work. Well, here's the thing. Demographics does not own this process. Demographics does not command this process. Demographics is not what determines your plan. Demographics is just one stage. See it there in stage 3? Demographics is just one stage. Now, does my team run demographics for our clients? Of course, because we need to have some numbers to work with. But the numbers are just math, and the math is not your life. This whole process, this 13-stage process, is where my team thrives in guiding doctors through. Look at stage 2, like financing, negotiating with banks. Now, just so you know, financing in cities is going to be different from financing in suburban areas. The amount of loan that you need. Look at below stage 3, right where it says stage 4, site selection, the real estate process. As my team negotiates real estate for our clients all over the country, the negotiations with landlords in cities are usually much more complicated than negotiating with landlords in suburban areas. Now, the negotiations still have to grant the doctor plenty of opportunity for cash flow. And when I say cash flow, look at down in stage 9. Stage 9 says marketing and hiring begin. This is where we need to start focusing on topics like cash flow. Because without cash flow, you're out of business. So when some people will say demographics are the thing you need to focus on, start by looking at demographics reports. Please remember that if you're considering startups in cities or suburban areas or even rural areas, just know that cash flow is far more important than a demographics report. So these are the 13 stages. I hope this is helpful for you. Because today's conversation is focused on demographics, I actually want to shift now to a couple other topics that might give you some ideas. These are some common startup questions, especially on this topic of city versus suburban areas, that you might want to start thinking through. Many doctors will ask these kinds of questions. Now, the questions I'm about to share with you are not the right questions to ask. But I assure you, many of your colleagues are asking these questions right now. Maybe you even ask some of these questions, but these common startup questions are not the ones you should focus on. Ready? So tell me if some of these sound familiar. All right. What ratio do I need? Sounds familiar, right? Are startups too risky? Well, actually, yes, they are too risky if you do them the wrong way. But I can show you hundreds of examples of doctors who are thriving and proud of their practices. They don't need to be risky if you follow a proven process. Is it too expensive? Well, yeah, it's, hundreds of thousands of dollars on top of your school debt, right? So is it too expensive? Of course, but that's a common startup question. The real question should be, how do I afford this and get cash flow? How do I grow with a profitable practice? The expense is not the problem. It's the plan that's the problem. Look, what about this? Business skills. What business skills do I need? So you do not need any business skills. Of the hundreds of doctors that I've helped, I'll bet you maybe 2 had any business experience at all. Or how about this? How do I hire the best team? There are lots of hiring tricks and tactics. You don't need any of those. I'll actually share with you, in another time, I'll share with you some hiring tools that work specifically for startups in dentistry. What about marketing? Will I even have any patients, right? That's a fair question. But the reality is that for marketing, the marketing for a startup practice in a city is going to be very different from marketing for patients in a suburban area. I can give you all kinds of examples for that. But one of the other questions that is a common startup question is, how do I even start? Well, here's some better startup questions that I think could give you some real momentum forward, because I hope through watching this mini training today, you're able to get some ideas for what can move you forward. Not just posing more questions, but actually giving you momentum. Here are a couple of them now. I'd like you to define which ideal patient you enjoy serving most. Who is it? If you could just cherry pick the kinds of people you would love to serve every day, who would they be? I would love to be able to help you fill your practice with those kinds of patients. And as a matter of fact, we've had a lot of our clients tell us that, I can't believe it, Jamie, sure, not 10 out of 10, not all 10 out of 10 patients are my ideal patients, but 8 or 9 out of 10, they're all matching the characteristics that we planned for. So first, you need to plan for it. Who is your ideal patient? Next, what practice model do you even want to create? Interestingly, what you're seeing here are not questions about demographics, right? It's not city versus suburban. It's more higher level. What practice model do you even want to create? How many operatories? Any specialty services? Do you want a surgical room? Are you a pediatric dentist serving in an OR somewhere? Are you a general dentist who wants to be able to bring in associates? What practice model do you want to create? Or what growth level would make you happy? Are you one of the doctors who wants to grow $1 million practice in the first year? Sure, we can help you do that. But a lot of doctors don't want that necessarily, because guess what? It's a lot of work. A lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of intensity. It's possible, but there are trade-offs. So the question becomes, are those trade-offs worth it to make you happy? Remember, it's not just the numbers. It's about what you would enjoy having for your practice. What would make you proud? Speaking of proud, what reputation do you want in your community? Like Dr. Brian, do you want to be someone who's known as one of the contributors to a great cause in your community? Do you want to be known as a person of great values and integrity and service in your community? What kind of reputation do you want? Because when you can define the kind of reputation you want, that, I believe, helps you define the kind of startup that we can plan together. So what startup plan do you want? Because with the right plan, I can show you all kinds of specific, proven processes that'll help you get the kind of startup you want, not just opening the doors. And that's the big takeaway here. Whether you're looking at a city or a suburban area, please don't fall for the tricks or the mistakes that so many other doctors have made, and so many of the so-called experts will tell you. The goal is not to open your startup. The goal is to have a startup that matches your values with questions like these. your ideal patient, your practice model, your growth level, the reputation you want, and the startup plan you can follow. So listen, we've covered a lot here. I just gave a course a few weeks ago with someone who leads a group called Nachos. Maybe you know who I'm referring to, and he's an amazing guy. Because I just offered this to his group, I'd like to offer it to you. If you'd like to catch this resource here, I'm giving away free copies of my book. We're only giving away 1,000 this year, so if you'd like to get a copy, I'd love to share one with you. I just text the word nachos to 44222. We're also going to give you a free PDF of the 13 stages timeline, so you can download it. You can even print it. A lot of our clients actually pin it to their wall during the process so they can follow along. And a free backstage pass, kind of backdoor access to the Startup Practice documentary, so you can binge watch the whole thing if you'd like. It's a powerful, moving resource. So I hope that all of this serves you. I hope this gives you some ideas about that big topic of city versus suburban startup. And if there's anything that I can do to help serve you in this process, I would love to get you some time with Jen. Remember the picture of Jen with the soccer t-shirt on? Jen, as our lead startup strategy advisor, I would love to help guide you with a free 1-hour strategy planning discussion. No selling involved, no pitch, just resources. You should hear the things that doctors say about talking with Jen. The amount of wisdom. She's worked with every doctor over the past 10 years of me working with doctors. She's worked with every doctor that I've ever helped. And she has incredible insights that will help guide you. Either way, text the word nachos to 44222. When you do, we'll send you some of these free resources and get you a copy of my best-selling book, get you a copy of the 13 Stages Timeline, get you a copy of Dr. Brian's story so you can learn even more about how the whole process worked for him with an incredible values-based practice from a great doctor, a good man. I hope this is useful for you. I hope this serves you well. And here's to you in your future in private practice ownership. Take care.